Live from the Bob Levy Broadcast Center overlooking the Toms River, it's time to get up, get out, do something. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Be a part of the show, 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Good morning. Welcome back to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. It is 7:09 on Tuesday, November 8th, Election Day 2016. So everybody needs to get up, get out, and vote today. Polls have been open for an hour and 9 minutes. I'm sure you're all are waiting in line right now to vote. Remember, join the conversation, 732-505-1160. And I am excited about our next guest because I am going to learn along with everybody out there. And I'm welcoming Timothy Tracey, a research associate at Monmouth University Polling Institute. Good morning.
Good morning, Phil. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Woke you up a little earlier this morning.
A little earlier than I'm used to, yeah.
Yeah, but as I said, you're probably going to be up for like the next 24 to 48 hours.
It is. It's gonna be a long day, but this is what we're waiting for. This is what I guess everyone's been waiting for it seems like an eternity.
It really does. It's like the last 16 days because it kind of started early, 18 months.
They seem to start earlier and earlier.
Yeah, and we haven't joked yet today, Zach and I, but I'm really, after tomorrow, going over the results and determining how it's going to affect the country as well as the state of New Jersey and local. I don't know what we're going to talk about on Thursday. Because
I guess we're gonna, it's gonna, this is all we've all been building up to this over the last, like you said, 18 months to 2 years, and then we're gonna have a day to recap, and then where do we go on from there? Although I'm sure we'll find something to talk about, especially this campaign and this election. It's kind of been unprecedented, obviously, but just kind of unexplainable in terms of things are happening left and right that probably you didn't expect to see
and never saw before. So with that said, let's talk a little about Tim's background, how you ended up where you are, and let's get into Monmouth University Polling Institute.
Sure. So I've been at the Polling Institute for about 3.5 years. But I went to school. I did OCC. I did community college in Ocean County for a couple of years, and then I finished my bachelor's degree at Monmouth. Took about a year off, then came back and did my graduate degree in public policy there. While I was there, I was actually a graduate assistant at the Polling Institute, so that's kind of how I got, I first got, introduced to statistics and doing polling. I had left when I graduated. I worked for Congress for a year. Then I went up to Carteret and did community and economic development for about 3 or 4 months, and then found out about an opening at the Polling Institute. Discussed it with Patrick, applied, and was fortunate enough to get the job, and here I am.
So Patrick Murray.
Yes, Patrick.
Okay.
He's our director.
He's our director, and I had said to you when you came in, I guess I did a little bit of research, and when we were talking over the weekend, Patrick Murray. Monmouth University Polling Institute, I wasn't really thinking big news, and then I see you guys are number one relative to polling institutes, and he's a big dude. Yeah,
I mean, it's. I guess I couldn't have picked a better time to be at the Polling Institute. It's kind of when we were transitioning over from, but in addition to being a New Jersey-centric polling institute in terms of establishing ourselves as New Jersey's poll of record, which I think we have.
Right.
But exploring and going into other states. So I mean, they did do some in the 2012 cycle, some national polling, but it really started, I guess, in terms of increased frequency in the midterms in 2014, where we did polling on the gubernatorial and Senate races in 8 or 9 states.
I think when you're part of candidate speeches. And they pump you up in one hand and then drop you down in the other. I think you've made news.
It really is for a political junkie like myself. I remember being in 3rd or 4th grade, and my father's got the TV on, and he's yelling at the TV. And I've always been a history person, so just watching, I was like, wow, I was always intrigued by what could make someone yell at the TV. So it just kind of sparked in my head, and I've kind of been following it ever since. So it's cool when you get to see candidates, whether it's good or bad,
right?
Talking about us.
Truth be told, you remember, like in kindergarten, when they say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I actually wrote, "I wanted to be governor of New Jersey."
I can't claim that.
This election has told me there is no way I could ever run for anything. There's not that there's so many skeletons in my closet, but I don't want people to know that much about me.
Exactly. It seems like, especially in today's age with the proliferation of social media and all this other stuff, it seems like, you have to basically put everything out there. And that's, I guess that's always been the case, but it seems like more and more now there's just, everyone's whole life is on social media or whatever it is.
In the most non-technical, simplified, for my simple mind. So we look, your polling shows Clinton leads by 6. Okay. How do you get there?
So there is a couple different steps to the process, but I think the most important way to begin talks about how, the kind of the science and the math behind polling. So we will get, people email us or give us a call and ask us, hey, I've never been called for a poll. How do I participate in your poll? We appreciate their willingness to do so. However, in terms of our standards and kind of the gold standard in polling, and not just political polling or election polling, but survey research, which is the industry that we work in and that polling falls under, kind of the gold standard of it, what it all comes down to is sampling and having a probabilistic sample, a scientific sample. So basically, in order for a poll to represent, the opinions or feelings of the population that you're interviewing, so whether it's New Jersey, whether it's Ocean County, whether it's the United States, everyone in that given population or that geographic area has to have an equal chance of being selected. So this way, what we do is we randomly call numbers. So we don't pick numbers because they're easy to get to. We don't pick numbers because we're looking for population segment A or population segment B. What we do is we're randomly selecting people to take part in our survey. So the way that we do that, there's a couple different ways that we sample people. One in the traditional method is called RDD sampling, which is random digit dialing. So basically what that is a computer will randomly generate numbers. So actually, we'll put the area code in and the first 3 numbers. So this is for geographic, making sure that we're getting a representative distribution across a geographic area. But the computer will randomly generate those last 4 numbers. So the one reason, again, it's at random. Everyone needs to have an equal chance of being selected. But 2 is, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, and you know yourself, Phil, is there are things called unlisted numbers.
Yes.
So when you randomly generate those last 4 digits of a telephone number, you're also making sure that you pull in people who are unlisted. Now, I'm sure some of your listeners and you may even be on a no-call list. I do want to say that polling and survey research organizations, we are exempt from those call lists.
Gotcha.
So this way, again, that given population, everyone has that equal chance of being selected.
And still no one's ever called me, but keep going.
No one's ever called me for a survey either. That may have more to do with the fact that I only have a cell phone and not a landline, but
do they call cell phones?
Yeah. So that's going to be that's a really, really important factor. So that's kind of the traditional method, the RDD sampling. Everyone, in a population has to have an equal chance of being selected. I kind of liken it to when you're cooking soup or chili and, it's there simmering. Now, you leave it there for maybe a half an hour. And if you want to go and you want to taste how it, and get a good example of how your soup or your chili's tasting, you're not going to just go there and skim off the top.
Right.
You're going to go there and you're going to mix it up. Real good. So this way you get a representative sample of what your chili or what your soup tastes like. Polling similar. We don't want to just call, purposefully call, half of our people from Ocean County or half of our people from Essex County. There's going to be a big difference in opinions about a lot of things, and it would bias our numbers. So this way, what we do is, like I said, we kind of, like, say if we're doing New Jersey, obviously there's a lot more people in Essex County than there are down in Cumberland County. So if we had, twice as many people from Cumberland County as Essex County, that would kind of throw our numbers off. So what we want to do is we make sure that when we're doing our phone calling, that we kind of get a good dispersion of people based upon what the geographical distribution of the population is in New Jersey. So that's kind of how we do it, and then again that's done through RDD sampling. Now,
okay, let's hold right there because we are going to have to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk about the other ways we do polling.
Sure.
Back in a moment.
Everything you need to know about the Jersey Shore. This is Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310.
Good morning. Welcome back to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. I am Phil Brilliant. It is 7:22 on Election Day, November 8th. We're continuing our conversation with Tim Tracey, Research Associate at Monmouth University Polling Institute, the number one polling institute in America. And we got him here live on WOBM AM. Look at that. We're doing good. Went to break. You were explaining how this polling process works. We talked as we went off, and then we talked a little bit off break, the landline cell phone.
Yeah. So that's a really, really important aspect of polling, especially in today's age. So back in 2000, about 15, 16 years ago. 2000, an
interesting election year.
A very interesting election year. But basically, when phone polling was really at its, when it was, in the midst of, I don't want to say its heyday, but let's say back, a decade and a half ago, pollsters were basically, all you had to do was call people's landlines because cell phones really hadn't exploded at that time yet. So you could call. It's pretty safe that you could call someone's landline and get a hold of them. So back then, response rates to surveys were about 30 to 32%, meaning that for 30 people out of every 100 people we called would pick up the phone and do a survey with us. Today, in 2016, the response rate's around 9%, meaning one, we're getting fewer people that actually pick up the phone. Now, there's a couple different aspects or reasons for that. One is caller ID. People are screening you. There's kind of the explosion of those kind of telemarketer calls. So people, that kind of makes it more difficult for us. So we make sure when we call someone, it says Monmouth University on the phone. If you have a caller ID, we tell you right away where we're from, why we're calling. We're not asking for money. We're only interested in your opinions. But another reason for that's also the rise in cell phones. So in 2000, like I said, there wasn't a lot of people using cell phones. Today, according to the estimates from the government, about 60% of the population, give or take, is cell phone only or cell phone primarily. So again, I only have a cell phone. I don't own a landline. I haven't used a landline except for at work.
Zach's saying he only has a cell phone too.
And that's the age group right there. The people, those who are cell phone only, they skew younger. They skew single. There's a couple different attributes that they had skewed towards, although that has started to change recently, as you're also starting to see one of the biggest growing groups in terms of cell phone only are older Americans. So basically, if you're calling only landlines, you're really only calling 40% of the population. Now, granted, like you said, there'll be another whatever percentage that actually they have landlines, but they just don't use it. They use cell phones. So to make sure that we're getting the best coverage possible and reaching the most people that we can, to make sure that we're not biasing our results, you have to call cell phones. So for us personally, we call half cell phones and half landlines to make sure that we're getting a good representation of the population we're trying to, find out their opinions.
Oh, okay. And I guess that's why the pollsters aren't calling me, because I don't answer my landline phone. So they're probably just hanging up.
No, I mean they're calling your cell phone. There is an important aspect of it. Calling cell phones is much more expensive than calling landlines, and the reason being is against federal law to use an auto dialer to call a cell phone. So as I was explaining earlier about the RDD sampling. So if we're calling a landline, we randomly generate the numbers. We can plug it into an auto dialer. It calls, and then when the person picks up the phone, you have the live interview. And we only do all of our surveys by live interview. You can't auto dial a cell phone. So we randomly generate the numbers, but then you actually have to have a person physically put in that phone number. It's against federal law. So that makes it more expensive to actually call the cell phones.
And I guess one of the increases in cell phone polling is the fact back in 2000, if you remember, we paid for incoming calls. When you had a cell phone, you had roaming, and probably if you called me in 2000, I wasn't answering the phone because I was going to pay
about
for
your
an
minutes.
unknown call.
Yeah, exactly.
Not going to happen. So we're going to go off to news break, get an update on the election, and when we come back, we want to wrap up relative to polling, how it all works. I also want to know, and crazy question is, when I walk to the poll and somebody's outside taking a poll and asking me who I voted for,
exit polls.
I want to know who that is.
Sure.
Okay. We'll be back in a moment.
The News is next. Live from the WOBM Newsroom, the Town Square, New Jersey News Network, and Fox News Radio. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310.
Good morning. Welcome back to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. It is 7:35 on Election Day, November 8th. And as I just said, I could probably talk all day about this with Tim Tracey, Research Associate at Monmouth University Polling Institute. But we'll come back on the radio and talk about it because maybe you should learn what I'm learning also. So let's talk about geographic coverage and margin of error.
Okay. So when we do our national surveys, we make sure that we're calling people from all over the country again, and when we're designing our sample in terms of making sure we have a good geographic distribution or representation of the country by the geographic distribution of the population, we have to make sure that we're calling in all these states and in all areas across the country. So it's really important to make sure that you do that in order to have a representative sample or a representative poll nationally. Now, as we were talking during the break, a lot of what you'll see, one important thing to look for is that margin of error. And basically what that margin of error is basically the error that could be associated with the results of your poll because of sampling. So what that margin of error means, so for our latest poll, our national poll that came out yesterday, our margin of error for likely voters was 3.6%. So basically what that means is, so for our final poll, we had Hillary Clinton at 50% and Donald Trump at 44%. So basically what that means, for instance, that 3.5 margin of error goes both ways. So what that means is because of sampling error, that 50% for Hillary Clinton could be 53.5, right, or it could be 46.5. And same thing for Donald Trump. Donald Trump's could be 47.5 or 40.5. So again, you can see let's say if that margin of error was really only 46.5 for Hillary and 47.5 for Donald Trump, it was they both went the opposite direction. So you have a different race,
right?
So
and usually, I don't think I've ever seen a margin of error more than 4%. So I'd have to believe that if you got back a margin of error of like 6 or 8%, you're probably repolling.
No, in some of our likely voter surveys, we have about a 4.5% almost a 5% margin of error, but the margin of error is related to your sample size. So when you do a survey of about 800 people, which is what we did for our last national survey, which was released yesterday, we interviewed 802 people, so that gave us a margin of error of about 3.5%.
So 802 people out of a population
320 million.
Yeah, and that is where the poll is placed.
Yes. So it's not it's something. So when you see national polls, you see a lot of organizations like ourselves do anywhere from 800 to 1,000. Now, like I said, our margin of error is for 802 people is 3.5%. If you do 1,000, you would expect it to be significantly lower, but it's not. It's 3.2%. As you start getting lower, especially under 400, that's when you start to see that margin of error kind of expand rapidly. So basically, there's an equation behind it. And again, it is math. There's an equation that has been developed. Basically shows you what the margin of error is. So when you go up to 2,000 people, your margin of error is still it's 2 point something. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but you would think if you doubled it from 1,000 to 2,000, a lot of people think, oh, it should go from 3% to 1.5%, but that's not the way it works. So for pollsters, because it is so expensive, you're still basically getting a statistically significant or statistically accurate representation of how the population feels between 1,000 or 800 or 1,000 and 2,000.
Yeah. And very important to state, Monmouth University Polling Institute, fully funded by Monmouth University, yes. No outside funding, no donations from the Clinton Foundation, no. Strictly funded by Monmouth University.
We are 100% independent, nonpartisan survey research center. So, like you said, Phil, we get our funding from the university. We do not do any polling for any particular candidate, particular party. Again, we tell them no. Again, it's really important for us to make sure that people who read our results know that we're completely nonpartisan. And we were very transparent about it. You'll read in our methodology statement, and this is really important, at the end of every poll, and if you go to our website, monmouth.edu/polling, you can see every poll report we've ever done. And at the end of each poll report, it's our methodology statement. So you can find out who we called, how we called them, when we called them, how many of them we called, how we weighted our data. So, I mean, we're completely upfront about everything.
Oh, that's great. And so the election ends midnight, 2:00 in the morning tonight. We have the outcome tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, are you starting to poll for the gubernatorial election?
I think maybe we'll take a little time off. Excuse me, because basically we've been polling nonstop since June. So a couple polls a week. So whether it's national or in different battleground states throughout the country, it's been really, really fun, and it's been an experience. I 10 years ago, I never thought I would be here in the midst of a really important presidential election, but it's been a great experience. But I think, and again, this is up to my director. Maybe he'll want to start polling tomorrow. I doubt it, but
he might need some sleep tomorrow.
I think he will. I think he will need some sleep. I think I'm going to need some sleep as well.
Yeah. So as I said, I've been asking the question today: are people voting for or against their candidate? And of course, nobody's called in to tell me, but we've been doing a local poll here. So you voting for or against your candidate?
So, me personally,
taking off your Monmouth University polling.
I'm not sure who I'm voting. What my vote for. I actually haven't made up my mind. So, and in New Jersey, you have a bunch of different candidates.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Even you, who look at the numbers every day, and you did point out to me that you did a poll about 2 weeks ago on your where is it? How important is it to make sure that Donald Trump is not elected? And 47% said very important. How important it is to make sure that Hillary Clinton is not elected? 40%. So again, it's not majority, but so many people in this country are not happy.
I believe if you add them up, they're very important and somewhat important. It is a majority.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of one of the underlying themes of this election is the unpopularity of both candidates, both major party candidates. It's something we've never seen before. We actually went back and looked at the number of people who have a favorable opinion of both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, because they're both underwater. More people have an unfavorable view of both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump than have a favorable view. So what we did is we looked at the number about 2 months ago, looked at the number of people who had a favorable opinion of both, and it was 2%. Which is the lowest it's been in modern time, in recent history, looking at exit poll data going back to 1980. We've never seen that low of a number.
That pretty much sums up the election of 2016. Tim, I really appreciate you coming this morning.
My pleasure, Phil.
Thanks for your time.
Me.
Hopefully our listeners have learned a lot. Monmouth University Polling Institute. Give us the website one more time.
www.monmouth.edu/polling.
And you'll see a lot and hear a lot from Monmouth University Polling Institute tonight. Thanks again.